Hello everyone. How are you doing today? Good, thanks. So I'm Joseph Javier. I'm treasurer of FYP, and I just want to apologize first of all. I know I've been running around like I have fire on my pants, and I'm one of the logistical coordinators here. So I'm sorry if you saw me in a certain way, but I just need some coffee. I'm good. So I wanted to introduce the Rita M. Cacas Foundation in a way that resonates people from all backgrounds and generations. We have generations from when the Filipino settlers first started and all the way up to the current generation. And thanks to the Rita M. Cacas Foundation, FYP was able to win their very first grant from Humanity DC. Thank you to Rita, you can raise your hand, Nila, Titchie, and Erwin. And let's start off now, shall we? So the goal of this panel is to have you see this as a lessons learned from history. And there are certain cultural perceptions in the way that people live their lives when Filipinos first settled here in the area, and now that the Filipino community has grown and up to now, and we experience things in a very different light than they did back then. So. To start off, to introduce the panel, Rita is a native Washingtonian and daughter of one of the early DC Filipino pioneers who arrived in the U.S. in 1929. And she is a co-author of Images of America, Filipinos in Washington, D.C., along with Rita. And she also heads the Rita M. Cacas Foundation, a charitable nonprofit organization established in 2015. The mission of RMCF is to acquire, preserve, and provide access to histories, culture, and archives of Filipino Americans in the metropolitan DC area. Titchie is a freelance writer. She has received several writing awards, like the 2014 Philippine American Press Club, the 2015 Mamacita Foundation Award, and the 2016 Doreen G. Fernandez Food Writing Award. For Dr. Erwin Tiongson, he's an economist and professor at Georgetown University. His personal essays have been published in the International Herald Tribune, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Washingtonian. Both Titchie and Dr. Erwin created the Filipinos on the Potomac Project, a family project documenting the landmarks of Filipino history and culture in Washington, D.C. Last but not least, we have Nila Toribio-Straka. She has excellent experience in the external affairs. And for the Side Out Foundation, that's an organization that raises funds to support breast cancer research and education of youth through volleyball. She's one of the main contributors of research and materials used in Rita's book, Filipinos in Washington, D.C. And they include photographs, news clippings, and other documents that were stashed away in bins by her parents. And they were among the very first pioneers and community. They took part in the community and what we're going to present. So, by a show of hands, have any of you heard of the Manila House community? Okay. So this community, correct me if I'm wrong, was the very first community, and we have community here, community in Rockville, community in Bethesda, but here the Manila House community was the very first. So I would like to bring up Rita to give us an overview, more of an overview for the Rita M. Cacas Foundation and a more in-depth introduction of the Manila House community.
Good morning, young professionals. Congratulations on your third annual conference. A big thank you to Aggie and for Joe for inviting us to be part of your miniature that was proposing last year. Yesterday, I was asked by Crystal Canare to share the vision for the foundation. This involved thinking about past challenges that we experienced within the PC Filipino community, taking advantage of ways to share what we've discovered as the present, and learning how to move our goals forward with time. So that's the key. And it was a perfect exercise in preparing for this conference session, lessons learned through history. Today we want to share with you our most recent discovery of an important DC Filipino historical place. In 1993, I received a small grant from the Historic Arts Council to document the early 20th century Filipinos who settled in the Washington, D.C. area. There were no academic resources or books that told a story about this community at the time. The D.C. elders were aging, and their families were unaware of their significant history here in the D.C. area. Some of the elders who are interviewed mentioned a gathering place for Filipinos during the late 1930s and into the late 50s, and that was called the Manila House, located near Washington Circle, which is less than 1 mile from here. The Manila House was an important place for the Filipino community at this time because it was a place to meet and hang out with other Filipinos. And I would say that this is similar to the social community provided by the FYP and other Filipino social and professional groups today. And you'll see this picture here. I'll make a tiny correction for Joe. The Manila House was the first community. There were actually several groups. There were people like the Science Circle, which we'll learn in a minute. There were actually the Filipino Executive Council, which is sort of the official group of people. And so we had several of these kind of pictures, big pictures, group pictures of people at these fancy hotels in D.C. And you always saw the Filipino Executive Council there. So really and truly, they were the Filipino Young Professionals of the mid-20th century. And so the Manila House is a place for people to meet and hang out with other Filipinos. It was a place to come for home-cooked Filipino meals. It was a place for Filipinos to gamble, and often there were fights. People got arrested. Not like today. There were 50-cent dances on Saturday nights, and Filipinos could speak their language there, and it was a place they could feel comfortable with each other, where they might not have been welcome in other places. Remember, this is the 30s and 40s. So, in 1993, when I received a grant and I started to interview people, there were no photographs of any evidence of the stories. It was when I was interviewing some of the elders for this for the project, they told me about them. So 15 years later, in 2008, while I was writing my book, and here's a copy of my book. You've seen these books at the bookstore. There are several about Filipinos, mostly there in California or the West Coast. And this was the first book about the DC Filipino community. So I was preparing for my book, and our family friends, the Toribios, told me that their grandmother ran the Manila House. And this was a big storefront, for when I was writing the book. I was just born. And the Toribios shared pictures of their grandmother, Asuncion Gabriela, who was affectionately known as Mama. And I don't think I have to translate because we're going to do that. Along with other pictures at events, and here's actually Nila's parents over here. Here's Mara and her husband, and then their aunt. And you'll hear a little more about their daily lives from Nila. So here's another picture. Mara managed the daily operations and cooked meals, delicious Filipino meals at the Manila House. And so members of her family were eyewitnesses to daily life at the Manila House. So you'll hear from Neil and he'll describe a lot of specific things. So who were the early DC Pinoys? When Filipinos came to the U.S. in the early 1900s, many of them arrived and settled in the West Coast, and they were primarily farm workers. They worked in fish canneries and pineapple fields in Hawaii. The DC Pinoy community was very, very different. Many of the Filipinos who arrived in California didn't want to work in the farms. Many of them, like my uncle Max, graduated from the University of California at Berkeley, but he was unable to find work because of hiring discrimination at that time. So my father and uncle decided to head east. They stopped in Chicago and New York, and they settled in Washington, D.C. around 1939. And over time, we began to learn more about the larger D.C. Filipino community, and I want to show you a very, very important photograph. And I have to say that this probably is the single most important photo in our archives of the University of Maryland. So just a quick snippet of Filipino history. After the Spanish-American War in 1898, the U.S. purchased and colonized the Philippines, but the Filipinos really wanted their independence. The 1960 Jones Act would promise that Filipinos would get their independence, but there were delays, and it took 30 years. This picture, the important picture, was taken in 1933 in front of the Union Station here in Washington, D.C. The photograph's description written on it documents the arrival of the Philippine Independence Delegation. This was a group of officials from the Philippines who were sent to the U.S. to make sure that the Philippines would become an independent nation. You'll also see a banner at the bottom that reads, "We demand New Deal for Philippine independence." And it's signed by the Design Circle. Look at that. We don't know much about the Design Circle, but what we did find out in our research is that this was the group that purchased the Manila House. Also a bit you'll hear from Erwin and Titchie, who are the creators of the Philippines and the Tour Project, who actually discovered the 1937 deed. We have the deed. That documented the purchase of the property at 2422 K Street. In their very careful research, Titchie and Erwin also discovered and shared significant information about the Manila House in Washington, D.C. city directories. Also in 1940 census listing, Filipinos who boarded at the Manila House, and I don't have a slide of that, but this is what the census form looked like. And then if you look at the detail, it actually shows the names of the people who were living there at the time, at that day on April 1 for the 1940 census was created. So they found stuff like that. They also found Washington Post articles about the Manila House, and this is where you saw people were arrested and they needed to pay paddy wagons to drag people away. They also learned about the Filipino author, poet, and expatriate, the unknown U.S. scientist, we'll learn that in a little bit, who documented his experiences in the book Scent of Apples. This is book right here. And there's also a chapter in the book called Manila House. So in here, in this book, it's actually fiction, so he tells stories. So even they're made up, but he was actually describing the community at the time. And so this book actually won the American Book Award in 1980. But the story continues on, and it's even more exciting. In 2015, the daughter of one of the DC Filipino pioneers donated 3 tiny little photographs of her parents taken in 1944, standing in front of her grave. There's the 2 daughters, well, the one daughter was holding back with black and white. That's my mom. So here are these 3 tiny little photos. And upon inspection with a magnifying glass, we discovered that etched on the transom above the door, the words Manila House, 2422. Is that exciting or what? I mean, this teeny tiny little photo, and I could feel it up when I saw it, I almost fell over. Oh my God, here, this is our perfect evidence. So there we are. And then, so what I did was I did a Google Map search in 2016. So I did a Google Map search for 2422 K Street, provides the current views of the building, currently owned by St. Paul's Episcopal Parish, and it is still architecturally the same building once was the former Manila House. So at that point, we had enough solid evidence to apply for recognition under the Literary Landmark Program administered by the American Library Association. The Literary Landmark Project commemorates a community building and its connections with a prominent author or literary figure, in our case, it was Rita Cacas, who actually lived in the Manila House and he was born there during his exile in the 1940s. The bronze plaque was approved and delivered to us. So here's the connections. Here's the United Library for the Landmark Program. The bronze plaque was delivered to us, and just in time for our Historia DC Symposium in October 2016, in time to celebrate Filipino American history and archives month. Here's a picture of Rita Chapman, who's the daughter of the woman who gave us the timing of the physical appearance in front of the Manila House in 1944. The bronze plaque was installed at the entrance of the Living House, which is the administrative offices of the St. Paul's Parish, near the same doorway that was marked in the Manila House. So here's a picture of the 3 sponsoring organizations of our dedication ceremony. So prior to 2016, the Manila House was unknown to the wider DC Filipino community. The Literary Landmark plaque is our lesson from history. It is a humble reminder to each of us today of the old Manila House gathering place located less than 1 mile away from here. It is a reminder for people who pass that spot each day on their way to or from work and who might stop to read the plaque. We will remember the Basilan Circle group who greeted Manuel Quezon, and the Philippine Independence Delegation at Union Station in 1933. We will remember people like my father and other of the taxi cab drivers like him, and the other elders like Kennedy who came to home-cooked meals, to gamble with their friends, and to dance on Saturday nights. We will remember Mana, Nila's grandmother, and we'll remember Bienvenido Santos, who described the lives of Filipinos in his chapter of the life. We will remember Rita Chapman's parents who posed for the picture in 1944 that solidified our application for a literary landmark. This plaque is our lesson learned from history. For the next generation of DC area Filipino Americans, that the bronze marker on that building at 2422 Street is a marker that commemorates not war, but it commemorates a community of Washington, D.C. Filipinos who lived here more than 80 years ago. So I wanted to dedicate my presentation, because it's very similar to Rob's, similar to my story, but I wanted to dedicate this presentation to my beloved mother who passed away last month. My mom came to the U.S. in 1954 when she was 24 years old. So roughly about the age some of you guys are. She was 20 years younger than my father, And when I started my project in 1993, she became my bridge to the next older generation to convince them that my project was credible and important. And so I hope that the foundation can serve as your bridge to the next generation, or that we all are bridges to the next generation. Just a quick invitation to you for our two events next month in October. We have our annual Historia PC Symposium, but we also have two events. The first one is Community Day on Sunday, October 20th. So look on your handout. We've got the two flyers, each of the two flyers that describe everything. And so Community Day is October 20th. It's a Sunday, and then 2 days later, we'll have our symposium at the Philippine Embassy, so just very close to here. That begins at 6:30, so after work, you're welcome to come here. Light refreshments, and again, the information is on your app. The conference the title is, we're observing the 75th anniversary of General MacArthur landing in Leyte. Maybe you know about the Ashama Bernstein, but it's from the Filipino Pinoy's perspective. And actually, one of our speakers is here. Sonny Blusa, Sonny Wayne, he's one of our speakers. To our speakers. So I will let's move on to the last question. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me okay? All right, good. So we're going to be using that microphone there, and let's get started. So the topic that I want to introduce is how did we end up in BC? And how did the first Filipino settlers end up in BC? So this question goes to Erwin all the way at the end. Can you describe how the first Filipino immigrants arrived in the area?
Thank you, Joe. So as Rita mentioned in her overview, there are a few key dates that explain a strong Philippine presence in the DC area. In 1898, at the end of the Spanish-American War, the U.S. essentially purchased the Philippines, and the Philippines became a colony of the United States. The Philippines did not become independent until after the Second World War, that's 1946. So between 1898 and 1946, there was a very strong Philippine presence here for all sorts of different reasons. Some of them worked for the federal government. Some of them were attached to U.S. government officials that previously served in the Philippines. Some came on their own, affiliated with the U.S. Navy. I wanted to tell you a little bit about a couple of people who were actually here over 100 years ago. It might serve to illustrate what I just said. Here is a book that I'm reading now. It was published in 1926. It's called Secrets of the White House. It was written by a former housekeeper at the White House. And here she's talking, in one chapter, she's talking about a Filipino who worked at the White House in 1909. His name was Juanico Lopez. He came here because he had worked for President Taft back when Taft was Governor General of the Philippines. And then later he joined the federal government, became a naturalized, possibly the first naturalized U.S. citizen, among first naturalized U.S. citizen among Filipino immigrants in the previous century. Here is a page from a 1909 GW yearbook. So he studied law at GW. He might have been the first president of the first ever Filipino Student Association, a networking association much like this one. We were here over 100 years ago. And he was here as a scholar, also known as a pensionat, meaning a government-funded student. He later became 5th Chief Justice of the Philippine Supreme Court and became a World War II hero. last week there was a screening of a film about his life. It's called Honor, the life and legacy of Jose Alcazar. So these are some of the people who came way before us, came here as a student, maybe as a worker, maybe worked for the federal government, maybe attached to the Navy, just like many of us here now. And just like us, back then they also cared about one another. They formed associations. They created a community among themselves, just like the Filipino Student Association created by Sir Santos, just like the Manila House, and just like your association.
So, by a show of hands, how many of you arrived in DC through work or a job assignment? Okay. How about raise your hand if you graduated from college in DC? Okay. How about born in the DMV area? Any DC unicorns in here? All right. Thank you for still being around. All right. How about just in the general DC, Jersey, Pennsylvania, just the Central East Coast region? How many of us were born in the general area, like the little bit outside of the DMV? Any Marylanders? Any Virginians? Okay. And how many of you are from California? There you go. And for those of you who raise your hands, did you just want to experience someplace new? You didn't just want to be away from your parents, right? Okay, so, yeah.
I'd just like to piggyback on what Erwin had to say, and mainly the people that you mentioned there were men. I'll just share my story. 1919, my grandmother came over. She was 19 years old at the time, and in the Philippines worked for a Navy lieutenant or general, and then he invited her to come here to still continue to work with her. So you have to picture back then, 1919, a female coming over, and not only did she come over, she also brought her 6-year-old sister to come with her, and then worked in this kind of atmosphere, and then later on established the Manila House here in Manchester.
All right, so moving on to a different topic. One of the key components of Filipino culture would be, can anyone fill in the blank? What would be the number one thing that would signify Filipino culture? Any guesses? Don't call it out, please. Yes, it is food. It is food. So, like lechon, pancit, any mouth watering that? Just by those two alone? Okay. All right, so other than enjoying our food, it also helps us bring people together. Helps us, that's how we define our sense of community. And a staple of that is just regular Filipino parties. We have a great time, enjoy great food, get to meet people from anywhere from our youngest siblings to our grandparents and family friends. You may call them your uncle or your tito. It seems like that to him, but even though you aren't related. But it's something that we always enjoy when the opportunity comes. So this question goes to Titchie and Nila. Where did people go for Filipino food back then?
So, you all know that Filipino food is a lot of food. We have a lot of food. So there's the Spanish component, the Chinese component, and we have our cinema and our. So to start off, if you look at the Washington Post, we have Manuel Quezon, the president of the Philippines, going to a restaurant called Manila. He was described as going to Manila and plotting Filipino families over steaming bowls of ketchup. So that's one. Another one is, we know that close to the Philippine country, where the Philippine Commonwealth government was situated. Senators Manya would go to a nearby Chinese restaurant. Well, it wasn't a Chinese restaurant, it was a restaurant led Martini, and they served Chinese food and would have the lo mein there. But he would say that there wasn't as good as our Now for Filipino food, Filipinos would traditionally cook it at home. One of our World War II heroes who lived here in Washington, D.C., General Vicente Lin, made his own patis, and we would like to think that he got it from the wharf, from the fish market. He only made it once because neighbors complained about the smell. Now, if they didn't make it at home, they would go to the Manila House. Nila has very vivid memories of going to the garden and making Nila would.
So at the time I was actually there. I was 6 years old when my memory starts back then. But there was a garden in the back of the Manila House where they grew ubu. If you're familiar with that, we have a picture here that's a long green, lime-colored green squash that was put in sinigang soup, and there were the long string beans that were in the back as well, and also if you have had the big melon, that was also in the back there that my grandma grew back then. So I'm sure at that point in time, I also remember you guys have been to the market on Eastern Avenue. I used to take the streetcar with her, and we would also get a chicken. And back then, it was just chickens running around, and we would pick one and say, we want that. They would give it to the man, do one of these things, she'd take it home, and then pluck it and cook chicken adobo. So I got to experience that with her at the Manila House. And as we talk about the Manila House being sort of a refuge, mainly what I remember were sailors, a lot of guys in uniform that would come there to eat a meal. We also had found a menu where $1 for a plate of rice and adobo was, the cost was $1. Yeah, so it was exciting. If you compare that today, you go get adobo, it's 15, 16 bucks.
And with that kind of adobo, anyone would like to take a guess on where you can find such good chicken adobo here in the DMV area?
Your grandma's house, right?
I heard Bistro 1521. Anyone else? Anyone else know any other Filipino restaurants in the area? There you go. And any other ones? Manila Mart? Yep. And raise your hand if you've been to Kuya Jaws out in Rockville. Everyone's hands. If you've never got the chance, please go out to Rockville. It's quite a drive, but trust me, it is worth your time. Worth your time. And there's also the Game Sports Pub over in Admo. So I highly recommend you visit to every one of those places. You'll definitely enjoy the food. Especially, you can never go wrong with Filipino food if it's cooked well, right? So, one last topic, and that's for work. Going back to Erwin, how did Filipinos get their jobs for a living, or how did they make their living? You mentioned Rita mentioned taxi cab drivers, some of them are students, and some of them are political officials. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yes. So just like us today, they did all sorts of things, right? So and way before the Manila House community, as I said, there were many Filipinos who came here before us, over 100 years ago, or maybe sometimes exactly 100 years ago. I'd like to tell you about somebody who was here exactly 100 years ago. Here's his picture taken in front of the Capitol. I'll tell you his name later. But he was a waiter here, came here on an adventure. So he knew nothing about DC, just decided one day he would leave the Philippines And come here, he was a waiter at the restaurant near Rock Creek Park. And he was an amateur artist. And one of his frequent customers was the social secretary of the First Lady back then, Mrs. Wilson. And the social secretary set up a meeting between this young man and President Wilson. He gave as gift to President Wilson a mother and child statue that he himself had sculpted. You can find it at the Woodrow Wilson house. It's in the bedroom because President Woodrow Wilson loved it, kept it near him until he died. President Wilson then thought, this is an amateur artist, I should help him. So he found a scholarship for this young man. This young man studied in New York, studied art in New York, then in Europe. Eventually he moved back to the Philippines and he became the first national artist for sculpture. His name is Guillermo Tolentino. So he was here as a waiter. Many of the people were here, as I said, as government officials. Just like us, they formed networks. And so if you find your job through a network, eventually you all end up doing similar things. There was an association of taxi drivers that was affiliated with the Manila House. There were people who worked for the Commonwealth government in exile at some point because this First World War started in December 1941, would go on through 1945. So many were here attached to the Commonwealth government in exile, including Bienvenido Santos himself, who wrote press releases for the Philippine government in exile. And some were here as students, just like us, and eventually found jobs here in the local area.
Now, to the audience, how many of you have gotten your current job through an online application process like USA Jobs or just through a website? Okay, how many of you got your job through networking, whether it be through personal, family, and friends, or through professional connections? Okay, with those two different kinds of job hiring processes, do you think there's not only one way to start your professional career? Do you think there would be any other ways besides those two? Okay. And can I have a volunteer from the audience to describe your work life today? I know that we have private, we have public, we have nonprofits. Do you think Filipinos back then, when they were working, do you think they experienced our work life the way we do now? Can we have a volunteer to explain their daily life in the professional workforce? Do I have to volunteer someone? I'm okay with awkward silence if you are. I have a friend. Okay, Will? Yeah.
Pat. Hey everybody. Get up at 6:30. I sat down to work at 7. Work until lunchtime. And go through system training. Finish up around 4. Go back home. And that's that. Watch Netflix, go to sleep. That's it.
Anyone else? Seems like, I guess that's normal for us 9 to 5 jobs. I'm definitely like that. I will come into work on some spreadsheets, go home, watch Netflix, exact same thing. But it was definitely different than we are now because we have all these conveniences, all these pleasures in life, rather than back then. They had people, they had family and friends, they would have really deep conversations with one another. Not like with the conveniences of technology today. So just keep that in mind. But with that, I would like to take our program to a close. Does anyone have any questions? Anyone? Yes.
I just have one comment.
We have a
I feel like I had to say something since I'm in this seat here. When it was first asked where you were from, I noticed a lot of people are not from this area, which is pretty typical for this area because this is the city of transplants from everywhere else. But I'm just curious that when people ask you where you're from, what do you tell them? Because I know when people, because that's an issue, because some people, the issue is who you are as an identity, because when people ask you where you're from, they want to know, why are you brown? And why do you look like that? So, what country are you from? But a lot of you weren't born in another country, you were born in America. So when people ask you where you're from, do you say you're from California? Or do you say you're from Maryland? Or do you just look them straight in the eye and dare them to ask you the next question? Or just, no, where are you really from? And then you say, well, I'm from California, but I'm really from Los Angeles. Yeah, which is what I do. And then if the guy's a total jerk, then he'll go, you can see this, him wearing his eyes. He says, okay, you know what I mean. So I go, so what do you mean? What do you mean? So where are you from? We're from here. We're Americans. We were born here. This is our connection, but we're here because we also have a cultural connection to the Philippines. So I'm just curious, but you don't have to answer this now. I just thought of that when they asked you where you're from. No one said, I'm from the Philippines. No, you're from here because you are here. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comments that they would like to share?
I have a question for the panelists. Sorry. I wanted to know what it feels like now for you. It seems like the Filipino community in the olden days was so small, and now there are so many more Filipinos here and so many clubs. You just go outside, you see all the tables of different communities being represented. What does it feel like now to just have all this Filipino love and movements around, and restaurants, so many restaurants?
So I'd like to answer that because when I was small, we lived in near the Marine Barracks here up until 1953. Then my parents moved to Accokeek, Maryland, which is out in the country back then. And I remember escorting, some Filipino families. We would have picnics out there, eat at our house. Mom would cook, and the majority of the people that were there were the Filipino friends from the Manila House. The only place that I can recall that had a pocket of Filipinos was Rita's area in Glass Manor and Oxon Hill, Maryland, which is, if you're familiar with that, it's just right over the bridge there. That was the crux of the Washington Filipino people, was in the Oxon Hill area. Now, as I came today and I sit in this room and I look at the young people and I go, wow, it's so nice to see this and the organizations that we have, that it really spirits my heart to see it being carried on. Because as we move through life, sometimes we forget about culture. We forget about where our roots are. As Sonny asked, where are you from? We're all Americans, hopefully most of us were born here, but we are technically the culture of the Filipino. And with that culture are, like we mentioned, food, music, dance, the arts. These are things that I want to leave with you all, that you need to tap into your parents, tap into your aunts and uncles, your grandparents, and ask them, where are your recipes? What are this? How can I cook this? My son just left for college his last year up in northern Vermont, and I'm making him pork adobo, freezing it in baggies, putting it in his cooler and saying, when you get there, put it in your icebox. So he gets up, Mom, you forgot to teach me how to cook this. He's 30 years old and he hasn't learned how to cook adobo yet. So learn these things, and I think as we see you all out there, it's great that you're here.
And I just wanted to make a quick comparison with the restaurant situation. So a couple of years ago, our foundation had our symposium and it featured Filipino food. It's a big thing. We had all these restaurants popping up all of a sudden, and all of a sudden Filipino food was the big thing. And I thought at the time, I was 60 years old, I've been eating Filipino food for 60 years. Why is it now that it's becoming so popular? Well, when I think back, and we had to sort of think this through for the symposium, but back in the I think it was the 70s and 80s, or mostly the 70s, there was a Filipino restaurant here, and it was in Georgetown, and it was this nice white tablecloth place that we took the important people went there. And I think the big difference, and the reason that that Filipino restaurant didn't do very well was, and I always blame my mom's generation, because they were the ones who said, oh, not as good as my pancit, not as good as my lumpia. And today, we have all these wonderful restaurants, and I think because we're all like now in this global society, we eat different foods. Why is it we can eat Vietnamese food, Korean food, and we all support our restaurants. So please continue to support our restaurants. I love going to Purple Patch, I helped to support the vaccine when they first started, but continue to do so. I felt really bad when the Lumpia Pancit Antipabang left in Wheaton, because it was only 5 minutes from my house. It's gone. I can't go get dinner one anymore. We go to Millamart. Anyway, so continue to support the community, and I think we're probably closing now. So, anything else?
Just like the 2 questions that were asked previously, I'm going to answer the last question by telling one more story from many years ago. So my answer to the question is, it's great that you're all here. It's great that we're all here. It's great that we're so visible in Filipino food, so present in the DC area. But also great to remember, I think that's the reason why we have this panel. We've been here a long time. Here's a picture of Irineo Esperancilla cooking at the White House. So he was called the chef to the chief. He was from Samar, moved here as a Navy personnel, and then from the Navy was recruited to become a White House steward. He served 4 US presidents. He carried Franklin Roosevelt to his deathbed. He has fascinating stories about his life at the White House, including as someone who cooked meals for 4 US presidents. Among his fascinating stories, one day he found a handgun hidden under the pillow of Franklin Roosevelt. So he thought, here was the most powerful person in the world. He feels the need to keep a handgun under his pillow because it was in the middle of the Second World War. And German assassins were sent to kill the US president. He also had funny stories. President Truman used to gargle every morning, according to him, with whiskey.
Hi, my name is Yannick. I'm a GW student, member of the Philippine Cultural Society here. Thank you so much for this presentation. This was absolutely wonderful. But I had a question about the connections between the Philams here on the East Coast and those on the West Coast. I know that those on the West Coast, and I'm wondering how that sort of played out, especially going into the 60s with the Delano Great Strike movement, as well as sort of other movements to construct a Philam identity nationwide. Did that happen, or were they relatively separate communities?
So when I started my research in 1993, there was like nothing. There were no books, there were no, I went to the Library of Congress, everything was about the West Coast, which is great. It means that the West Coast people are far ahead of us. They were about 10 or 15 years way ahead of us documenting their communities. So really my book was the very first start, and then my project in 1993 was the very first important step. And one of the things that I always bring up is that so the Filipinos who came here at the beginning of the 20th century, they were farm workers, the laborers, and that sort of thing. And the people that ended up in DC were more military men, they were government workers. And so what happened around 1965, there was an immigration law that changed. It allowed more Filipinos to come to the country. And so this is when the Filipino lawyers, the doctors, the nurses, the more professionals came. And what's very interesting, when I go give these talks, I show these slides of the large Filipino parties at their hotels, and they're like, their jaws drop because they couldn't imagine Filipinos being here, before they came. And so I always describe this, when you come here, when you set foot in the country or wherever you land, history kind of starts for you at that point. Nobody tends to look back, and so, but it's really great because there is sort of a humbling that, we're all having this identity, we're searching for identity. And so when you meet people, like I met a couple of people, I just moved to the area. I said, connect with the FYP, find a professional organization, because that's where you'll make your connections. And so I know it's not exactly answering the question about the East Coast and West Coast, but I think that, when the West Coast people come here, they come to hear my talk, and they'll find that it's a different community here in DC, totally different community. I think that's
Now, I just wanted to say the difference with you have to look at the geography. The West Coast, of course, is closer to the Philippines. A lot of times the Navy bases down in World War II, we saw the influx of the people settling, and when they retired or got out of the service, that's where they kind of ended up. My dad was a World War II vet. He ended up finishing his tour in Patuxent, Maryland. I have an uncle that was here since 1909, and we have a picture of him. Most of the Filipinos back then who were in the Navy were stewards, and we have a picture of them gathered in front of the Naval Academy, and a lot of them served there. So you also have to look at the clusters of where those people ended up. It's a larger community than what we have here in Washington, D.C. You all are helping to pull it together. I think the universities, we have, my niece went to Towson. They have a Filipino community there. We have Maryland, you have GW, you have Georgetown, American. So the university, you all are the ones that are helping us bring it together into the culture.
All right, then. Thank you so much. Can I have a round of applause for these people? I would like to thank the Rita Cacas Foundation again for partnering with FYP and helping us win this grant from Humanities DC. And we would like to present to you some gifts as a token of our appreciation. So